New York in the 1980s was a city of contrasts and chaos. It was marked by a high crime rate, economic downturn, and growing social tensions. At the same time, it was also a magnet for art, punk, hip-hop, and graffiti. But the city's rougher edges, the darkness in its alleys and behind closed doors, gave rise to some of its most chilling and persistent tales. The Subway Slayer and the fear of the underground. The New York City subway was notorious for crime in the 80s. Dimly lit and covered in graffiti, the train cars became a symbol of urban danger. Passengers were constantly warned about pickpockets and violent assaults, and stories about strange figures and shadows beneath the city circulated widely. One of the most frightening tales was of the Subway Slayer, an alleged serial killer who stalked people in New York's subway. Though the Subway Slayer was an urban legend, it fed on real incidents, such as the case of Bernard Goetz, who in 1984 shot 4 young men he claimed were trying to rob him. Goetz became a controversial figure, a reminder of just how dangerous the subway could be. People avoided certain lines after dark, casting suspicious glances at strangers. Central Park and the Wilding, an assault that shook New York. One of the most terrifying incidents to rock the city was the Central Park jogger case. In 1989, a woman was found brutally assaulted and raped in Central Park, leading to a manhunt that focused on 5 young men who would become known as the Central Park Five. The assault triggered panic, intensifying New Yorkers' fear of Central Park at night, a place already notorious for drug dealers and muggers. Although it was later proven that the 5 young men were innocent and the real perpetrator was found, the incident cast a shadow over New York for years. The dark side of Tompkins Square Park. On the Lower East Side, Tompkins Square Park in the 80s was rife with drug use, homeless encampments, and violent clashes. Police often avoided the area, and wealthier residents gave it a wide berth. A disturbing tale that haunted the area was about the false homeless, individuals who reportedly infiltrated the homeless camps and committed terrible acts before disappearing back into the night. No one knew who they were, but locals claimed that cries and screams could be heard from the park at night. The Vampire of Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village was known for its bohemian charm, but it was also home to some of the city's more bizarre characters. An urban legend from the area told of the Vampire of Greenwich Village, a figure who supposedly lived a hidden life in basements and sewers. The vampire was said to attack solitary people returning home late from the bars, drinking their blood. This story created a mixture of fear and fascination among both locals and visitors. While it was unlikely there was an actual vampire, New York in the 80s had no shortage of dangerous characters who might have inspired the tale. The crack epidemic and the shadow people. Much of New York's dark energy in the 80s came from the crack cocaine epidemic. The crack wave transformed entire neighborhoods into zones of extreme crime and desperation. A widespread urban myth revolved around the shadow people, a hallucination many crack users claimed to see. These shadows were said to be dark figures waiting in the shadows, almost like demons, and some believed they were manifestations of the drug's destructive impact. Even those who didn't use drugs recounted occasions where they saw shadow men following them in the dark. Son of Sam and the Lingering Nightmare. Though David Berkowitz, known as Son of Sam, terrorized New York primarily in the 1970s, his figure still haunted the city through the 80s. Berkowitz became infamous for his random shootings and his claims of speaking with a demon who ordered him to kill. The fear that Son of Sam instilled led to continuing stories of similar demonic influences and psychotic individuals haunting the city. Many were convinced that New York was still home to copycats and people who dreamed of continuing Son of Sam's dark legacy. The ghosts of the Chelsea Hotel. The Chelsea Hotel, already legendary for its past bohemian residents, took on a darker reputation in the 1980s. Famous artists, musicians, and writers had long been drawn to its shabby grandeur, but it was also known for tragic and violent incidents. Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols famously lived there with Nancy Spungen, who was found dead in their room in 1978. By the 80s, rumors of hauntings and eerie apparitions in the halls were rampant. Guests and residents reported hearing ghostly laughter, faint music, and whispers late at night. Some claimed to have seen Nancy's ghost wandering the halls, while others reported the presence of unidentifiable figures. The hotel's creaking, decaying corridors held a mix of allure and dread, making it both a dream destination for artists and a nightmare for the superstitious. The Alley Cats of Alphabet City. Alphabet City in Manhattan's East Village was notorious for crime, poverty, and drug use during the 1980s. The area was rife with abandoned buildings and dimly lit alleys where danger lurked. One persistent legend among locals was that of the alley cats. Not literal cats, but a gang of silent, ruthless individuals who moved through the shadows, preying on unsuspecting residents. Some stories claimed that the alley cats were remnants of a cult. Others said they were addicts who had turned feral, losing their humanity entirely. People claimed to hear strange hissing sounds and whispers when they walked alone at night, leading to tales of ghostly cats watching from the dark. The stories were enough to make people avoid certain alleys completely, even in broad daylight. The haunted apartments of Hell's Kitchen. Hell's Kitchen had long been a gritty, working-class neighborhood, but in the 80s, it gained a reputation for being one of the city's most dangerous areas. As crime and gang activity increased, so did tales of haunted apartment buildings. One story that persisted was of an old tenement building, where residents complained of sudden, icy drafts, inexplicable footsteps, and lights flickering in empty rooms. Some even reported seeing ghostly apparitions of past tenants who had met violent ends, caught in cycles of abuse, eviction, or addiction. The building's landlord allegedly dismissed these tales as nonsense, but people continued to report sightings of spectral figures lingering in hallways or staring out of windows. It became known as the Curse of Hell's Kitchen, a place where the violence of the neighborhood was mirrored by the restless spirits that reportedly haunted it. The Vanishing Girls of the Meatpacking District. The Meatpacking District, now a trendy area, was in the 80s a gritty, industrial zone with a dark underbelly. Stories circulated about young women who went missing after visiting the area's clubs and bars, only to be last seen near the abandoned warehouses and slaughterhouses. Known as the Vanishing Girls, these women were said to be victims of an unknown predator who hid in the shadows of the district. Locals reported seeing strange figures lurking near the loading docks and hearing disembodied voices echo through the narrow streets at night. While police investigations often led to dead ends, some believed that the Meatpacking District was haunted by these lost souls, forever trapped in the eerie stillness of the night. This legend gave the district a sinister reputation, and people were wary of wandering there alone after dark. The sewers and the ratmen. New York's sewers have always had a mythical reputation, but in the 1980s, the idea of ratmen began to circulate, a mix of urban legend and real-life horror stories. As the city's homeless population grew, some people found refuge in the vast network of tunnels and abandoned subway stations beneath the city. The ratmen were said to be homeless individuals who had been driven mad by isolation, filth, and hunger, eventually becoming something almost subhuman. Witnesses claimed to see wild-eyed figures emerging from manholes and sewer grates, covered in grime and moving with an unnatural agility. Legend said that these ratmen survived by scavenging and that they had become hostile to anyone who ventured too close to their underground homes. Some New Yorkers even reported hearing strange noises echoing from the sewers at night, heightening the city's fear of what lay beneath. The cult of the devil worshippers. One of the most pervasive fears in New York City during the 80s was the rumor of satanic cults operating in secret. This was fueled in part by the satanic panic that swept across the United States, a widespread fear that devil worship and occult practices were infiltrating communities. Stories circulated about cults performing rituals in hidden basements, abandoned buildings, or even in Central Park. People claimed to find evidence of strange symbols, mutilated animals, and graffiti with ominous messages in these locations. Some believe that these cultists were responsible for disappearances and unsolved crimes, feeding the paranoia that the city harbored dark forces lurking just out of sight. The fear of these cults led some New Yorkers to avoid certain areas, and the cult legends only grew with every unexplained incident. The Watchers of Wall Street. Even Wall Street, the financial heart of the city, had its share of eerie tales in the 80s. Known for its high stakes and relentless energy, Wall Street was rumored to be haunted by the Watchers, shadowy figures supposedly seen by cleaning staff or late-night workers, standing silently and observing from dark corners. Some believed these figures were the ghosts of investors who had lost everything in the Great Depression, trapped forever in the financial district. Others claimed that they were merely hallucinations brought on by exhaustion and stress, but the legend persisted. Those who worked late nights on Wall Street would often joke about the Watchers, but there was an unspoken rule: don't look too closely at the shadows. These stories reveal a city haunted by its own anxieties, a place where the line between fear and reality was razor thin. Each neighborhood had its own ghosts and dark legends, each story a reflection of the struggles and the shadows of the time. While New York has changed dramatically since the 1980s, These tales continue to linger, reminders of a darker era in the city's past, a time when fear ran as deep as the subway tunnels and as high as the skyscrapers. The 1980s remain etched in memory as a decade when New York's grit and mystery reached their peak, its legends becoming part of the city's soul.